We decided to focus on this because of its relevance in capacity building, its role in economic growth, and its importance in supporting people and children, particularly living in fragile environments. Additionally, the area of education is incredibly dynamic in that it must respond to the context of the time. For example, education has inevitably been changed through the development of technology and AI and reflects a growing digital divide and the resulting inequality. Additionally, education is naturally reactive in that the health, social and political climate of the time influences education significantly. We saw examples of this recently during the COVID pandemic, and we continue to see the influences of political thought and norms on what is taught in schools. In terms of what we learnt from it, we researched education as well as mental health and young people, trying to take an intersectional approach in considering issues faced by different demographics. Amongst other things, we found that a lack of education resulting from fragility and conflict, as expected, contributes negatively to mental health. Similarly, education can play an important role in helping children and young people to psychologically address and come to terms with, and also have a space to discuss the fragile environment in which they might live. E-learning was also explored in this context, investigating ways in which it can be mobilized to keep education accessible for people living in the context of war and conflict. Teachers' rights is an essential element of a balanced and empowering education, and they have become ever more important. We found that the digital divide and its implications for education and mental health is growing and is impacting people very asymmetrically. And the importance of international cooperation to bridge the digital divide was explored through case studies from developed and developing countries. We also found that e-learning, while maintaining a great potential for improving the accessibility of education in remote areas, particularly where there are difficulties with transport, it also comes with many challenges, including, but obviously not limited to, access to internet, access to the technology itself, and access to electricity. While e-learning can mobilize education, its use accordingly is a little limited, where resources to access it are not available. Lastly, we found that the influence of AI will inevitably have, and already has had, an irreversible impact on education and is likely to widen the digital divide through unequal accessibility. Cyber warfare could have a significant impact on digitalization and e-learning, and education is not immune to being mobilized as a weapon of propaganda or misinformation. And I'll now hand over to Francois to discuss the second session.
So hi everyone. So the second session we had was about war and peace in the digital era. And so today I'm going to share with you what I thought were the key insights of each participant in these discussions. So the first part of the discussion was centered around the Russian-Ukraine conflict, where two arguments were provided conflictually with Alissa on one side and Jivan on the other side. Alissa was providing Russian arguments, arguing several aspects, including the fact that about the inevitability of the conflict. She argued, as a fictive representative of Russia, that the conflict was unavoidable due to NATO unnecessary and provocative expansion in the region. And she especially emphasized the rather shocking declaration of Bush government that said that NATO would never expand beyond Germany, which, as history proved, wasn't true. Then, speaking about tactics, she emphasized that Russia is conducting conventional warfare in a defense perspective, trying to respect international war law, while the US is much more willing to use alternative type of warfare, especially strategic use of infrastructure destructions, as in the case of Nord Stream pipeline destructions. And then going on into the legal justification, she emphasized on the argument provided by Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, which say that there is a right to go to war when it's come to defending their own people, which apply to the Russian-speaking region of Ukraine. Then on the other side, Jivan provided the Ukraine perspective, insisting on the fact that this conflict was absolutely unavoidable in the long term, given Russia imperialism and nationalistic traditions, and given Putin increasingly relying on those forces to maintain its power. Then going on into the tactics, Jivan emphasized that both Russia and Ukraine are engaged in a very unconventional type of warfare, where yes, the military aspect is important, but there is also a lot of side war, including use of cyber warfare and use of media. And then on the legal justification, Jivan emphasized on the importance of Article 2.4 of the United Nations Charters, which deals with the prohibition of the use of forces in international relations. So the second discussions was between me and Zumaro, and we discussed the Korean War. So firstly, Zumaro was representing the North Korean perspective, arguing that the conflict was inevitable until both Korea are reunified under Kim Il-sung dreams, given that both countries should be one, and that the only fact that the countries are divided is an historical aberration. Going on to the tactics, it relied on the fact that despite claims of North Korea war crimes, North Korea mostly rely on nuclear deterrence and cyber warfare, which are a more soft kind of warfare involving less casualties. It then justified the conflict on the legal side, arguing that sanctions are a barrier to economic development, which goes against the priority of the United Nations. And the resolution against nuclearization are an explicit violation of the sovereignty of North Korea. On the other side, I was providing South Korea argument, arguing that the conflict was unavoidable, but not because of the fact that both Korea need to be reunified, but because of the ideological framework in the region and the hegemonic power on both sides, US and China, which are promoting two drastically different types of ideology, making it Korea as a country in the middle of this ideological struggle, a country that is predestined to be a realm of conflict. Going on the tactics, I'll argue that Korea was more benevolent than North Korea. Sorry, South Korea was more benevolent than North Korea, given that it was more relying on soft power, trying to use as much of economic influence and cultural influence to reaffirm its position in the world stage, rather than explicitly bombing or trying to bomb its neighbor country in order to assess its legitimacy. And then going on to the legal justification, I argued that even though South Korea had committed crimes in the past, crime against its own populations and human rights abuses, even during the dictatorships, nothing that what South Korea had ever committed was even comparable to what North Korea has committed to its own people. And therefore that on a comparative level, South Korea still remain the least worst, hence the most legitimate regimes in terms of international human rights. Finally, going on to the third discussions, it was about the Myanmar civil war. So personally, it was a topic I knew the less about. So it's the one I learned the most about. And so from what I saw in this one, but forgive me if I made any mistake, but there is two arguments. One which is provided by the military junta, which was in Ignacio perspective. So he argues that the conflict was necessary in order to avoid a balkanization of Myanmar and unify the country. So I suppose it means that given Myanmar many different ethnies and many different religions, it would have been impossible to maintain a one country system without having an authoritarian system imposing this kind of secular state. Going on to the tactics, Ignacio argues that for all the critics it has received, the junta has actually made encouraging effort in establishing dialogues and peace treaty with the guerrillas in the regions, hence being the most prominent force in ensuring stabilities and peace in a country. And finally, on the legal justification, he rely on the rather controversial constitution of 2008, which legitimates the current government, and argue that the coup d'etat was also legitimate in the sense that the last election was rigged. On the other side, we had Edwina perspective, who argues that the conflict would have been easily avoidable if democracy hadn't been undermined by a coup. About the tactics that the national unity government is national unity government, yeah, is trying to do. It doesn't have necessarily the strength to do another coup or a military intervention in Myanmar, but they will rely heavily on gaining international community support on the international level and at the national level in pushing for more protest and labor strikes in order to boycott the current government. And about the legal justification, Edwina provided a pretty strong cases of the fact that the national unity government was the government most inclusive of minority, the government recognized by most major international institutions and countries such as the EU, Korea, US, and UN, and also the government that won the last general election by a very large margin, therefore providing it more legitimacy. So I think my overall perspective on this exercise was that it was a very interesting challenge, I think, for many of us, because I suppose that many of us were asked to defend positions that we not necessarily believe in. For me, it was pretty easy because South Korea is rather easy defendable. But I think for people like Ignacio or for people like Zumaro, you probably learn a lot by trying to study the country's perspective from a radically different position and trying to challenge your own perception. And personally, I believe that this is truly the best way to analyze international politics, is to force yourself to listen to the argument on the other side, because only by doing this you can be allowed to have a truly comprehensive understanding of the international affairs. So yeah, thank you very much, and I really enjoyed these sessions, and I really hope that the next ASKY people can also have this type of exercise.
Hi everyone. Today, Ignacio and I will be doing a wrap-up session on the 2 mentoring sessions under the topic of sustainability. So we'll start with a brief introduction, and then Ignacio will summarize Dr. Daniel Pinkston's session on sustainability, and then I'll summarize the session on Her Excellency Michelle Winthrop's session on climate change, gender, and community action, and then we'll make a conclusion. So there are a few reasons why we have picked the topic of sustainability, and also specifically these 2 mentors. So firstly, for the reasons behind the topic of sustainability, we believe that sustainability is the most pressing challenge to be addressed for future generations, and especially climate change problems also hit closer to home year after year. Especially in Korea, this time of the year, we can see how the weather is fluctuating, and even during winter, like right now, it's above 10 degrees. And the second reason is to understand the complexity of the problem and its solutions. So we'll be able to listen to the problems from the perspective of scholars who actually studies this topic, and also from an ambassador who has been championing this cause for a very long time. And thirdly, we can also reflect on what actions we can take as future leaders and see what we can do in order to play our part to make a difference. For the reasons behind why we pick these mentors are because we believe that they have extensive experiences in the issue of sustainability and climate change, and they'll be able to provide us with insights to the issue at the deeper level. So these 2 reasons are interlinked. And lastly, we also believe that it will provide us with a valuable networking opportunity with the mentors.
So hello everyone. Today I will share the insights from the mentoring session with Professor Daniel Pinkston. Our focus was on sustainable development through technological advancements, a term which encloses different descriptions, but all of them converge on the imperative to preserve resources without compromising the ability of future generations. Next slide, please. Thank you. So during this session, we explored the foundational aspects of environmental challenges, gained insights into the global implications, examined country-specific approaches, and underscored the importance of the role of the good governance. Additionally, valuable data sources were highlighted, revealing challenges such as negative externalities, transboundary issues, and their political implications. Next slide. So I would like to emphasize a particular part of the session, namely the discussion of determinants that contribute to the success of environmental management. Professor Pinkston explained how these factors are essential in navigating the complexity in sustainable development. We have the efforts by NGOs, which play a significant role in coming up with shaping environmental policies and initiatives. Then we have the consensus of leaders and the scientific support that it provides a strong framework for addressing environmental challenges. Then we have consideration for developing countries' needs. So to success in environmental management, it requires a thoughtful consideration of the unique needs of developing countries. And Professor Pinkston emphasized the importance of tailoring strategies to accommodate a diverse socioeconomic context. Then we have consideration of the cost of action. We need to understand that the financial implications of these environmental initiatives and guarantee that they are not only effective, but also economically viable in the long run. And finally, we have support of major countries that I don't think needs further explanation. Next slide, please. So among all of them, and in relation to the round of questions made by our group, I think the factors that need to be highlighted here are first the scientific support. So as previously emphasized, it is evident that the political will, coupled with scientific credibility, holds the potential to instigate transformative policies, policy change, and facilitates the integration of cutting-edge technology in these initiatives. And it is notable this alignment can pave the way for advancements in crucial areas such as energy technologies, green technologies, energy efficiency, and the promotion of circular economy principles. Moreover, it extends its influence in the field of, for example, smart cities, where innovative solutions are driven by political determination and scientific insight, contribute to this sustainable urban development. Then we have the civil society engagement. Civil society, of course, including individuals and organizations, can actively engage in supporting and advocating for environmental issues, influencing policies, and even mobilize public support. So particularly civil society involvement in NGOs allow us to raise awareness and hold leaders and major countries accountable for their environmental commitments. While consensus among leaders and scientific support is foundational, civil society engagement in NGOs ensures there is always a continuous bottom-up pressure for positive environmental changes. Next slide, please. So it is clear that avoiding the tragedy of the commons, that means where self-interest harm a shared resource, is crucial. We have to explore country-specific approaches from unilateral to bilateral and multilateral strategies, which is, for example, a case in Montreal, Kyoto, or Paris agreements. And while acknowledging their effectiveness could be better, these cooperative approaches are indispensable for nurturing the willingness to continue collaboration. And looking ahead, our main takeaway from this session is to underscore the significance of a good governance in tackling environmental challenges. And overall, it is essential to know that it is not just about understanding the issue, it's about also taking meaningful steps towards a sustainable future through collective effort.
I'll be making a summary on Her Excellency Michelle Winthrop's session. So Her Excellency Michelle Winthrop is the Ambassador of Ireland to the Republic of Korea, and she's a longtime advocate for climate change, and her current book will also advocate for progress in this field. I think a few of the notable work that she's currently assuming is that she's the country director at Farm Africa, where she has worked on food security in Ethiopia, and she also negotiated in the COP26. So the first question that I've asked while listening to her is why sustainability? So I believe that there are two reasons for why we have to discuss about the issue of sustainability. So firstly, it's the climate goals. The climate goals is actually way off track, and there are records broken all over the world. The goal is that we have to peak the emissions by 2025. And in order to achieve this, we have to reduce emissions by 43% by 2030. So there's an urgent need to not only work towards the goals of climate change, but also to integrate the climate change goals with the sustainable development goals. And one of the effort that she has discussed with us, that she has brought up to our attention, is a Better World report that is available online that argues that climate change actually draws back all other development progress, and it gives the holistic approach of climate change and sustainable development goals. And the report also argued that we have to ensure that other actions actually don't affect climate change progress. And the second reason is the gap between developed and developing countries. So the rich countries can actually shift behaviors without much of government interventions because the market responds to the changes. I think part of the reasons why this is the case is because people in developed countries have more education in terms of climate change and its impacts. And also the people who are living in developed countries can also afford to change, because oftentimes choosing to be sustainable is actually choosing the more expensive option. And for people who are in developing countries, there's a need for a bigger role of the state, because the state has to put in policies to actually encourage the shift in behavior, because people will not change from the current habits because they are the most economical. She also highlighted the loss and damages compensation that because developing countries are the countries that emit the least greenhouse gases, but actually are the ones suffering the most from the impact of climate change. And she brought up the example of Ireland, where there's been progress on the loss and damage fund, and they are financing countries that are worse suffering because of climate. And because it's a public fund, the government has to also be extra careful in order to ensure transparency and also find a balance between domestic needs and international aid. And she also emphasized on the need to have human touch in the discussion regarding climate change. And the second question that I asked myself is, why now? Why do we have this discussion about climate change now? So first things first, the session was conducted in the week where COP28 was about to happen. And she highlighted one of the most important discussion to have in COP28, which is the decision on the global stocktake. So what is the global stocktake? It's a fundamental component of the Paris Agreement, which is used to monitor its implementation and evaluate the collective progress made in achieving the agreed goals. So the global stocktake links the implementation of nationally determined contributions, the NDCs, with the overarching goals of the Paris Agreement, and has the ultimate aim of raising climate ambition. And another problem that she highlighted in the COP20 that can appear in the COP28 is the geopolitics issue. Due to the war in the Ukraine and also the issue in Middle East, the tensions from geopolitics actually creeps into climate progress, and it can hinder the discussion that is happening. And the second reason is gender equality. So gender equality, she has especially highlighted, has a strong link to climate action. And she mentioned how important it is to get women on board, because women have unique perspective and they are more involved on issues such as family health and also providing energy in the households. So the population and the awareness regarding this issue is actually in the hands of the woman. She has highlighted a few of the organizations and the people that are active in the advancements of climate change. One of them is Climate Wise Women. That is an assembly of women who have a lot to say about climate change, and they are very active in championing their cause. And another notable woman is Constance Ocolet. And she also highlighted in her story that actually a lot of women got beaten for not having food on the table in Africa. And this is why it's important to actually bring women on the table in the discussion, even in developing countries in Africa. And she also recommended us a book by Mary Robinson titled Climate Justice, because it gives us hope and also tells personal story of both men and women who are fighting on climate action. And lastly, she highlighted the importance of individual action. She especially mentioned about how she was very surprised about the plastic waste in Korea, and because there's a very low usage of reusable cups comparing to Europe. And traditionally in Korea, there are other options that are very sustainable, such as the cloth wrapping, the gift wrapping practice using cloth that she highlighted. But due to modernization, we actually forget about sustainability. And so there's a need for us to actually go back to the traditional roots that are more sustainable. She also shared anecdotes about the problems of plastic waste, and she highlighted the problem of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and also the story of Flossie and the beach cleaners. She's a teenager in Ireland who actually started beach cleaning every weekend. And from just having a few people doing it, and now they have 680 regular volunteers. So she emphasized on really the importance of us as individuals to take action and the little changes that we do and how it can make a difference. So I'll end by giving you this quote by Ban Ki-moon. So he mentioned that climate change does not respect border. It does not respect who you are, rich and poor, small and big. Therefore, this is what we call global challenges, which require global solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll start the podcast or report on the podcast on digital diplomacy. So Zomari and I, we invited Professor Mason Ritchie, Professor of International Relations at the Hanguk University of Foreign Studies. He has published numerous research in international security, specifically on alliance politics, on the Korean Peninsula. He also looks at European politics, and he's an expert as well in cybersecurity. So we decided that he would be one of the best individuals to invite on our podcast. So he first gave us an understanding of digital diplomacy, and he began to highlight the role of diplomacy in the broader context of international relations. And then he went on to look at traditional measures of diplomacy. And he mentioned that diplomacy used to be measured by the number of embassies and diplomats. However, with digital diplomacy, this is evolving as states can now use networks, physical structures, the internet, to facilitate rapid communication. And this offers both opportunities and challenges, because while it enables a direct connection between governments and people, and also government to government, it also opens up avenues for malicious activities such as election subversion and disinformation campaigns. Therefore, he emphasized the need for robust cybersecurity strategies. The other part of the podcast, we looked at digital diplomacy and regional security. How has digital diplomacy enhanced regional security? And he mentioned global health security in the context of the global pandemic, where, for example, there was enormous cooperation between Washington and Seoul. He then went on to mention cultural exchanges, which is facilitated by digital tools, which enhances diplomatic relations by fostering people-to-people connections that in turn foster government-to-government relations. So there's basically a domino effect going on. He looked at open source intelligence and how this democratization of information promotes transparency and accountability, and how even some states uses digital tools to convey messages of deterrence. And he mentioned that this has contributed to regional security. Then we looked at the dark side, how digitalization of international relations is not only positive, because he looked at cyber attacks, for example, provocations or cyber attacks by Russia against Ukraine, and also another example of digital messages, videos depicting an attack on another state. Furthermore, he looked at disinformation campaigns and how it has been used to undermine political truth, or what we know as the truth, creating an environment where people question the very essence or the very nature of reality. He went on to look at the various trends in digital diplomacy, and he said that states need to come up with comprehensive national strategy, a national cybersecurity strategy, because there's the proliferation of misinformation, which is exacerbated by the use of AI and deep fakes powered by AI, which makes it difficult to discern what is really truth from fiction. Finally, he went on to look at emerging technologies and how quantum computing has emerged as a critical factor, looking particularly at encryption, because cybercomputing jeopardizes the cryptography behind secure transmission between embassies and their home states. Therefore, he emphasized a need to look at this factor. I'll now turn over to Zamario, who has a more critical and case study approach on the podcast, which we did with Professor Ritchie.
Hi, everyone, and thanks to Javon for kicking off the podcast analysis with some solid insights. So on my part, I aim to delve into the crucial aspects highlighted by our speaker, which is Professor Ritchie Mason, that has been mentioned. So this is going to be the particular emphasis on the prospective impact of quantum computing in the realm of digital diplomacy. While Javon comprehensively covered various aspects, I will specifically address the intriguing intersection of quantum computing, and I would not be quoting some of the that has been mentioned by the speakers because it's already mentioned by Javon, but I'm rather into like what we can do to analyze for this one in the future. So I will specifically address this intersection of quantum computing and its potential role in shaping diplomatic strategies. Apart from that, I think it's also been mentioned that we have the additional information on the complexities surrounding Russia's hybrid warfare, that what has been called, I think, shedding light on the multifaceted nature of modern geopolitical challenges. So I will start with the quantum computing. To introduce about the quantum computing itself, it is actually the significant implication for digital diplomacy. It addressed the key challenging and unlocking new possibilities in the realm of secure communication, data analysis, and international collaboration. According to what we analyzed during this podcast, there are specific reasons why actually we need the quantum computing in digital diplomacy. And I will be just dividing into three main and maybe the most vital reasons for the quantum computing for digital diplomacy. The first one would be the efficient data analysis for informed decision making. So diplomacy actually involves navigating complex geopolitical landscapes, and efficient data analysis is crucial for informed decision making. Quantum computing's capacity for parallelism and optimization can accelerate the analysis of vast data sets, providing diplomats with quicker insight into geopolitical trends, public sentiments, and intelligence reports. This enhanced analytical capability that enables diplomats to respond more effectively to dynamic situations and make well-informed decisions. The second one, we believe that quantum computing would help in fostering international collaboration on quantum standards. The development and deployment of quantum technologies require international collaboration, without any doubt. And the establishment of the standards to ensure interoperability and security and also responsible use. Digital diplomacy plays a role in fostering global cooperation on quantum safe standards, which including the policies and regulations. So speaking of which, collaborative efforts are necessary to address the challenges and opportunities posed by quantum computing, ensuring a shared understanding of its impact on secure communication and diplomatic activities. And the last one on the quantum computing reasons to digital diplomacy is actually preparing for quantum safe diplomatic infrastructure. As we know that quantum computing technology is currently advancing, digital diplomacy needs to prepare for the integration of the quantum safe infrastructure. And this includes the updating communication networks, protocols, and encryption standards to withstand potential quantum threats. So proactive measures are essential for future-proof diplomatic system. This is going to be ensuring the continuity of secure communication channels and the protection of the sensitive diplomatic information. So by this analysis, I think we can conclude that the quantum computing is essential for digital diplomacy in order to address emerging challenges in secure communication, leverage advanced data analysis for decision-making, foster global collaboration on quantum standards, and preparing for the integration of the quantum-safe diplomatic infrastructure. As this technology continues to evolve, their incorporation into the field of digital diplomacy becomes strategic imperative for nations aiming to navigate the complexities of the modern diplomatic landscape securely and efficiently. And the second point that I would like to touch upon is actually the one that personally intrigued me, I guess. It connected into the hybrid warfare, which involves specifically into the Russia as the notable actor. This employ a combination of military, informational, and cyber tactics to achieve strategic objective. I think I came up with 4 key points that is highlighting why Russia's approach to hybrid warfare is considered particularly dangerous for Western countries, according to what our speaker mentioned during the podcast. But to be honest, this is mainly based on my perspective after the analysis itself. So what I think is need to be focusing on is that the first one is information warfare and disinformation mastery. Russia excels in information warfare, utilizing disinformation campaign, state-controlled media, and social media manipulation to shape narratives and influence public opinion. The spread of misleading information during critical political events can undermine trust in Western institutions, and it's potentially destabilizing democratic processes. I might be quite strong coming here, but I think this is what I believe what was happening during my analysis as well, like after some thought on what our speaker said. And the second one is like the cyber operation and critical infrastructure vulnerability. So Russian state-sponsored cyber operation pose a substantial threat to Western nations. This targeting the critical infrastructure such as energy grids and financial system. So cyber attacks can have severe consequences, and Russia demonstrated capability and willingness to engage in cyber warfare, make its hybrid tactics a potent force in digital age. And the third one, I think it's connected into the proxy warfare and unconventional tactics. I believe that Russia employs proxy forces and unconventional tactics to advance its strategic goals, contributing to regional instability. And this involvement can create challenges for Western nations in responding effectively to conflicts where Russian interests are at play, showcasing the adaptability and complexity of the Russia's hybrid warfare strategy. And the last one, I think I would like to touch upon the political subversion and influence operation. Russia engaged in political subversion by supporting political movements and parties aligned with its interests, I think. It coupled as well with influence operations targeting broader political landscapes. This multifaceted approach, I think, aims to shape policies and decision-making process in Western democracies, potentially compromising the integrity of democratic institution and governance structure. So that's what I think quite important to be highlighted during my analysis. Though I think there's some points that might be needs to be reviewed again. I think when the podcast itself is going to be published, so it's going to be purely understandable, I think, in both the speaker's perspective and also like our report analysis when it comes to the final report. But then to wrap up with this point, I think quantum computing brings exciting prospect to digital diplomacy that address issue in secure communication, data analysis, and global cooperation. While on the flip side, I think Russia's hybrid warfare needs to be prioritized as well, as the tactics are serious concern for the West, using tricks like information warfare and cyber operations. In order to tackle these challenges, I think we need to beef up some cybersecurity, resilience institution, and united fronts against disinformation. The potential perks of quantum computing and the risk of hybrid warfare highlight the evolving dynamic shaping the future of diplomacy. So I think this case study that I brought up for these 2 cases can be also answering why we need to make this as prioritization for the sustainable development as well, I think. So that's pretty much it. And thank you very much, everyone, for this whole discussion. I got a lot of information because I think I came out with like a really strong technological and practical part of my knowledge. But then after our discussion, I also learned about how to think in diplomatic way and also like how to, work more in the diplomacy. And thanks for Yvonne to give me some opportunity to also work with expertise that I wouldn't be able to get it while I do my research on my university. So that's pretty much everything. And thank you very much, everyone.